History likes to pretend it's logical. That empires rise through strategy, that wars are won by careful planning, that heroes and villains are shaped by grand decisions. But sometimes, history is nothing more than a coin in the air. This video dives into 10 real moments when everything we know, wars, lives, legacies, balanced on a razor-thin margin. A missed signal. A cloud in the sky. A pen on the moon. You're about to discover the top 10 times history turned on a coin flip, almost literally. And if you don't stick around for number 1, let's just say you're leaving your historical fate to chance. Before we begin, flip that like button, subscribe, and let's test fate together. Number 1, the coin toss that saved Gandhi's life. In 1908, a young Mohandas Gandhi was invited to travel by train to a political rally in South Africa. He and his friends were part of the Indian diaspora fighting racial discrimination under British colonial rule. That day, Gandhi's companions were divided on which route to take. Two options, two trains, both departing within the hour. To break the tie, someone reached into a pocket, pulled out a coin, and tossed it. The coin decided Gandhi's fate. He boarded one train. The other, chosen by chance not to be his, was ambushed by a hostile mob enraged by anti-colonial agitation. Several passengers were injured, some hospitalized. Had Gandhi been on board, his young, rising voice could have been permanently silenced. This seemingly mundane choice ensured Gandhi survived not only that day, but to lead an entire movement decades later. He would go on to challenge the British Empire through satyagraha, non-violent resistance that inspired leaders across the world. The Salt March. The Quit India movement. His leadership lit a fire in India that burned through centuries of colonial rule. Had the coin landed differently, the 20th century might have lacked one of its most powerful agents of peaceful revolution. Number 2, Hiroshima or Kokura? The US had 2 nuclear bombs, and 2 targets, Hiroshima and Kokura. The first bomb hit Hiroshima. The second? Scheduled for Kokura. Kokura was a military stronghold, housing an arsenal and factories. Strategically, it made sense. But fate had other ideas. On August 9, 1945, the American B-29 bomber Boxcar, carrying the second atomic bomb, took off toward Kokura. But when they arrived, a thick cloud cover obscured the target. They circled once. Then again. And a third time. Still no clear view. With fuel running low, the mission commander made a call: abandon Kokura. Head for the backup target, Nagasaki. That decision, made in the cockpit under pressure, changed 2 cities' destinies. Kokura was spared. Nagasaki was devastated. Ironically, Kokura would forever be known as the city that got lucky, not through diplomacy or force, but by a veil of clouds. Eyewitnesses in Nagasaki described the blast as the end of the world. Those in Kokura, just 100 miles away, lived another day. Number 3, the wrong turn in Sarajevo. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand arrived in Sarajevo with his wife, Sophie. They were touring Bosnia under tense political conditions. That morning, a coordinated assassination plot failed. A grenade thrown at their car missed but injured several in the entourage. Shaken but determined, Franz insisted on visiting the wounded at the hospital. He altered his route, without informing his driver. As the motorcade turned onto a side street, the driver realized the mistake and began to reverse. By pure coincidence, Gavrilo Princip, one of the failed assassins, was standing outside a sandwich shop on that very corner. Seeing the stalled car, Princip stepped forward and fired. One bullet struck Sophie. The second killed the Archduke. The world held its breath. Austria blamed Serbia. Alliances were triggered. And the First World War ignited. What if the driver had been told of the route change? What if Princip had taken a different street? Number 4, Armstrong or Aldrin? Everyone knows Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon. But that wasn't a certainty. During preparations for Apollo 11, NASA officials debated which astronaut would step onto the lunar surface first. Both Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were mission veterans, and both had trained for every scenario. Buzz Aldrin, the lunar module pilot, was known for his assertiveness and strong technical background. He was considered by many as the natural choice. However, the configuration of the lunar module Eagle played a quiet but decisive role. The cramped interior meant that Commander Armstrong was positioned closer to the hatch. NASA, favoring simplicity and safety, deferred to the practicality of position over prestige. Armstrong would be first. On July 20, 1969, the world watched as Armstrong descended the ladder and spoke the immortal words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Buzz Aldrin followed shortly after, but the world would forever associate the moon landing with Armstrong's calm presence. That hatch position, a technical detail, cast a long shadow. Aldrin, though heroic, often wrestled with being second. Number 5, Caesar crossing the Rubicon. In 49 BC, Julius Caesar stood on the edge of the Rubicon River, the boundary between Gaul and Italy. By Roman law, bringing his army across would be an act of war against the Republic. Caesar hesitated. His political enemies in Rome had stripped him of his command and ordered him to return alone. Crossing meant civil war, but not crossing meant surrender. The moment was tense. His legions waited in silence, their fate tied to Caesar's next words. Finally, he turned to his officers and reportedly declared, "Alea iacta est, the die is cast." He stepped into the river. His soldiers followed. That single choice plunged Rome into a brutal civil conflict. Caesar would eventually emerge victorious, transforming himself from general to dictator. The Republic, as it had existed for centuries, would never recover. What followed was the rise of imperial Rome under Caesar's heir, Augustus. Had Caesar yielded, Roman history might have veered toward restoration, not autocracy. But fate rolled with him. Number 6, the pen that saved Apollo 11. After a perfect lunar landing in 1969, the Apollo 11 crew encountered a terrifying problem, a broken circuit breaker switch on the lunar module. The switch controlled the ascent engine, the only system capable of lifting Armstrong and Aldrin off the moon to rendezvous with Michael Collins in lunar orbit. Without it, they would be stranded 238,000 miles from Earth. Communication with Houston confirmed the worst: mission control couldn't trigger the engine remotely. Panic could have set in. But Aldrin calmly surveyed the cabin. Among the few tools they had was a simple felt-tip pen. He wedged the pen into the recessed panel, pressing the broken contact into place. It worked. The circuit closed. The engine later ignited successfully, and the crew returned home safely, thanks to a desk accessory. This wasn't an engineering marvel. It was an improvised miracle, a symbol of astronaut composure and human adaptability. The image of a pen in a circuit breaker is far less iconic than a boot print on lunar soil, but perhaps more heroic. Number 7, the Cuban Missile Crisis Veto. In 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Soviet submarine named B-59 was trapped in the waters near Cuba by U.S. Navy destroyers. The Americans had no idea that B-59 carried a nuclear torpedo and that its communication systems had failed. The sub's crew thought nuclear war might have already started. Depth charges rumbled above as warnings, not attacks. But to the men aboard, they sounded like the opening strikes of World War III. Protocol aboard B-59 required a unanimous decision among the 3 senior officers to launch the nuclear weapon. 2 voted yes. The third, Vasily Arkhipov, said no. He argued for restraint. He insisted they surface and await orders. He persuaded the others to hold fire, defying pressure in the most intense moment imaginable. They surfaced. The standoff ended. The world moved back from the edge. Historians later credited Arkhipov's decision as the one that prevented a nuclear war. One man's judgment outweighed panic, protocol, and peer pressure. Number 8, Hamilton's hesitation. In 1804, political rivals Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr faced off in a duel in Weehawken, New Jersey, a misty cliffside with a deadly history. The tension between the two men had simmered for years, marked by personal slights and political betrayals. When Burr demanded satisfaction, Hamilton agreed to duel, despite his moral opposition to the practice. Hamilton intended to throw away his shot, aiming deliberately wide or into the air, as he had done before in prior duels. It was a gesture of honor, but one that required split-second timing and absolute clarity. Burr, however, didn't know Hamilton's intention. As the pistols were raised, Hamilton hesitated. In that brief pause, Burr fired. The bullet struck Hamilton just above the hip, shattering his organs and spine. He died the next day. Hamilton's death shocked the nation. Burr's reputation never recovered, and the Federalist Party lost one of its brightest minds. Had Hamilton fired first or not hesitated, America's political structure might have evolved very differently. A duel meant to resolve honor instead carved a new direction for a young republic, one twitch at a time. Number 9, the Beatles and a studio gamble. In 1962, a little-known Liverpool band called the Beatles faced rejection from major record labels. Decca Records passed, famously saying, "Guitar groups are on the way out." Enter George Martin, a producer with a classical background and a keen ear for talent. He met the band and wasn't immediately impressed, but he saw potential in their humor, charm, and chemistry. Despite doubts, he offered them a contract with EMI's Parlophone label. He asked for one change: replace drummer Pete Best. Enter Ringo Starr. Their first single, "Love Me Do," wasn't an instant hit, but it gained traction. By the time Please Please Me released, Beatlemania was on the rise. Martin's gamble transformed the band and pop music forever. The Beatles went on to revolutionize songwriting, production, and global music culture. What if Martin had said no? Would John, Paul, George, and Ringo have drifted into obscurity? It's hard to imagine the modern musical landscape without them, but it nearly happened. A career built on experimentation, risk, and collaboration began with one man's instinct to take a second listen. Number 10, Bush versus Gore. In the 2000 U.S. presidential election, the outcome hinged on Florida and just 537 votes. That razor-thin margin sparked recounts, court battles, and weeks of national suspense. The country waited while the fate of its next president hung in limbo. In the end, the U.S. Supreme Court halted the Florida recount, awarding the state's 25 electoral votes to George W. Bush. He won the presidency by a single state and a handful of ballots. Had just a few hundred voters chosen differently, or if the infamous butterfly ballot in Palm Beach hadn't confused so many, history could have turned. The Bush administration's response to 9/11, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the entire trajectory of 21st century geopolitics were set in motion. History didn't choose a path. It tripped into one. Over a vote. Over a piece of paper. Over uncertainty, magnified by legal chaos. In Florida, protesters and election officials clashed in chaotic scenes. Hanging chads became household terms, and democracy itself seemed tangled in paperwork. Meanwhile, both candidates watched nervously from afar, Bush at his ranch, Gore at his headquarters, unsure who would be called president. Networks flipped projections like tossed coins. In the end, it wasn't just a vote count. It was a mirror reflecting how fragile modern systems can be. When uncertainty reigns, even the most powerful democracy falters on the edge of chance. The thin thread of history, fate doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers. A delay. A vote. A broken button. These aren't just details, they are the threads that weave the world as we know it. So next time someone tells you history is inevitable, flip a coin. And if you enjoyed this dive into history's narrow margins, subscribe and click the next video before fate clicks it for you. Which moment shocked you the most, and which one do you think changed the world more than we realize? Let us know in the comments below.